All right, welcome to another episode of UltraBranded. Today we have Tom Collin, amazing guy. I've known Tom for many years now. He is someone I go to when I need clear perspective on things because he's laser focused in his ability to read the situation, no matter the variables, right? To read the situation and come forward. But anyway, enough about me. Tom, tell me a little bit about yourself. Just tell the listeners, a little bit about Tom Collin, who he is.
I'm a Frenchman and a Pole. I was educated in the UK and in the US, and I've lived in 9 different countries. I started my life as a banker, the son of an artist and a writer. And then I needed to find more meaning in my life, and I lucked out. I could utilize some of my skill set and parlay this into the world of education. I was initially, 20 years ago, offered to join a company where I would acquire international schools, and I was put in charge of one for a period of time, and then I was told to go to China to launch a new school in the middle of Sichuan province in Chengdu.
Did you have any experience about China, or did you know anything about China before you went there?
I had not even visited once. I was literally told to pack up and go and meet a couple of people who would help me there.
So you just basically parachuted your way into a foreign country, so to speak. Literally.
Indeed, straight out of running a school in Geneva, Switzerland, I was told to go to Chengdu and open a new school, as it were.
How did that work out for you?
Well enough. This is still the Le Mans International School of Chengdu, part of the Nord Anglia group of schools now. I'm told it's doing well.
Unbelievable. Fantastic. So yeah, so how did you basically build your brand? I mean, how could you actually give some advice? Actually, before even we go to that, I want to talk about this. When I spoke to you about doing this podcast, and I said, Tom, you are an amazing brand. I want to have you on the show because I want people to learn, something, get some nuggets from how you've built your brand. And you went, no, I'm not a brand, and basically, I think you're an anti-brand, and like. Is there a brand versus anti-brand? Is it a continuum? What? Can you just shed some light here?
Yes, my first reaction was I have no brand. I don't care about brand building and how I come across in general, as much as I would like to be seen as courteous and polite. That's really the extent of it. And then upon reflection, I think that there is something to it. And as we discussed earlier, there is this notion of anti-brand, a non-brand, so to speak, which is accentuating what is there, what is present, putting an emphasis on some aspects that have come naturally, being artless in a deliberate fashion, but not seeking to artificially sculpt yourself into something that you're not. This is who I am. I come with my experience, with my perspective, and a reputation for directness, some say bluntness, and not being terribly preoccupied with the feelings of others or the perceptions of others, within reason, of course. And that is that translates into, well, for those who see it in a positive light, as candor, as directness, as truthfulness and authenticity. I presume this is what accrues over time to what people see me as, and maybe a brand.
Right. So, but you did not start out saying, okay, I want to have these sort of values, and I'm going to project these values. You just sort of said, just let it be, but it's going to be shaped by some sort of value system that I have.
Absolutely. I am not seeking to project this or that. I am seeking to embody the values that I have and to always be truthful to these core values that I have of truthfulness, of authenticity, of intellectual rigor, and moral fiber, as well as sensitivity, as well as perceptiveness. And by hewing to the truthfulness of who I am, I'm hoping to be consistent in how I am perceived by others.
Interesting. Interesting. Now, I would say that is the authenticity of an individual, right? Because you bring so many levels, you bring so many levels of value to the equation. But to somebody who is actually starting out, 18 years old or whatever, let me ask it a different way. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self, knowing what you know?
I think you need to look down and up. Down to where you are coming from. What are you rooted in? What substrate, what soil are you rooted in? And what are your roots made of? What do you value and what do you seek to nurture and express? This is the looking down. And looking up is, what do you aspire to? What do you aspire to be? What do you aspire to do? And what do you aspire to leave behind? And then grow towards that.
Interesting. So it's a sort of an internal reflection into what's made you who you are, but also in terms of your hopes, your dreams, your achievements. It's where you want to go, and sort of bringing those two things together.
That's right, and the roots and the soil are unchangeable. You were born in the circumstances that you were born in, and the roots you have grown are mostly roots that have grown naturally. You can continue to intentionally grow them in certain directions, but they are really there. They're your legacy. They're where you're coming from.
Right.
Where you want to grow towards, the trunk and the branches and the leaves and the flowers, is what you can be more deliberate in, without detaching yourself from your roots. Your roots are your roots. You cannot reinvent yourself and put yourself out of your soil and to become something else altogether. But you can grow into something, and a version, and ideally the best version of yourself you can be.
Right. Now, this brings me to my next very pertinent point, which is, now you are in education right now. You have been in the field of education for many years, especially, childhood, the whole child, developing the whole child. Now, what if a child, or your roots, the soil that you've been in, is not very conducive? For example, trauma, mental health issues, maybe criminal, that kind of abuse, that kind of stuff, right? How would someone actually try to build their brand given such a checkered past?
I would say that first you need to see yourself and acknowledge yourself. You have grown in the circumstances that you have, and looking the other way is not going to help. You need to acknowledge your provenance, warts and all, trauma and all, violence and all. It has happened, it's undeniable, and you must acknowledge it. Acknowledgement is the first step towards a form of self-acceptance and letting go of these traumatic experiences, so that these experiences no longer have purchase and power over you. You cannot decree that from one day to the next they have no longer any purchase on you. That's not realistic. But a step towards a reconciliation with your past is to acknowledge it and to affirm yourself as being distinct from these experiences. These experiences do not define you as a human being. You are detached and separate from them. And at that point in time, you are able to snip off that power, that purchase that these experiences have on you. And once you are detached from them, you can start defining yourself up, as we said, as to, now that I have acknowledged my roots, I have acknowledged the burden of the past, and I am detached of the burden of the past, and I acknowledge and I embrace the positive in my past, I can build a future that is positive, that's detached from the negative past, but it's built upon and firmly so on the positive of my past.
Right. Now, I've seen many icons, have grown to amazing popularity because they reached out into the most deepest, darkest part of their past and actually were willing to be vulnerable and actually showcase it as part of their brand. This is where I came from. I came from an abusive family, or I came from, I lived as a drug addict. I was sleeping on the streets, and this makes them so authentic. What do you think about like actually wearing your badge, your shame like a badge?
This is your own decision to make. This is your private and path and a decision that nobody can impose upon you. If you feel detached enough that the past has no longer any impact on you, that you can in a disengaged way look at it and accept it and share it with others, that decision is yours and yours only. You owe it to no one to divulge the traumas of your past if you wish not to. But if you wish for it to be a springboard to positivity and success, and you can instrumentalize this in a positive way, but you need to be quite prudent with this, because some people do instrumentalize the past trauma without having fully resolved them, and that can come with its own set of difficulties. But if you believe truly that you are past, that you have resolved the trauma of the past, and that you can now incorporate it in how you come across, how you project yourself, then you be you. You use it. You owe it to yourself that it's an instrument that you can use for your own benefit, and that is no longer holding you back. But that is a very individual decision to make.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. And I think for the most part, most people who make that decision, they don't make it for themselves, but they make it for others, because they want to show, for example, to motivate someone to say, look, it can be done. You can get out of that rut you're in, that kind of a thing. So they're thinking of the other person when they talk about their own vulnerabilities.
I think there's great power in sharing, in that we are all vulnerable. We are all victims of one traumatic incident or other, or many. And knowing that we're not alone, that we all have been the victims of some difficulty in the past, is in a way normalizes it and helps us process it, and reassures us that we're not exceptional in a bad sense, that we are completely normal. I see an example of people who have endured wars. They tend to process this better than people who have been the victims of individual violence, maybe equivalent violence. But because they are part of a society that has as a whole all endured this violence, they can process it. They can rationalize it and externalize it much better than people who have been singled out, especially people who have not been able to process and share this experience. So yes, it's very helpful for prominent people to disclose their own vulnerabilities, to help others see them as humans who have suffered and who have powered through the pain and the suffering and still achieved, and to be role models for everyone else who have experienced past trauma.
Right. The other thing about telling about your failures, so to speak, I think makes you far more human. So, given the example of, say, a startup founder in Silicon Valley, they openly speak about the amount of money they lost and whatever. But in other parts of the world, perhaps there is a sort of a societal expectation or about business owners whereby they don't want to talk about their failures so openly.
Silicon Valley has a very peculiar culture that can be sometimes almost macho. Its embrace of risk and its acceptance of intelligent failure. Incompetent failure is definitely not glorified, but trying in good faith an idea that is viable and implementing it and executing well and failing to get traction is respectable. Having a bad idea and executing it poorly is not respectable. So we must distinguish the two. Indeed, this ability to embrace risk and its natural corollary, failure. If we push the envelope, most of us will fail at it because we are probing the frontiers of the known. We're going into the unknown. All simple problems have been solved. We are nowadays only dealing with complex problems that we don't know the answers to. And only by pushing those boundaries can we hope to push the envelope of what humanity can and will do. And that entails most of those attempting to push this envelope, not succeeding at it. And this culture is ultimately what gives America and some other countries that embrace this mentality, or locations that embrace this mentality, its enormous edge. The fear of failure is the small death of society, of people. It's stasis, it's stagnancy. It's the inability to seek renewal and that creative destruction brings about. It's essential to a degree to have a small population of risk takers who embrace risk and thrive on the risk of failure and aspire to enormous riches, because the few who succeed really spectacularly. And we need them. We need them to be ready to sacrifice themselves, their lives, their well-being, and their futures, really, in order to try to push humanity's reach. And I respect them. These are people whose value is enormous to humanity as a whole.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tom, we're running out of time. Just to wrap up now this episode of the podcast, what's your motto for 2023?
Push the envelope, disrupt, break the walls of my space, which is education, and explore new perspectives for education. Education has been stagnant, has been entrenched in its past practices for too long. It is now high time that we reinvent it, and I am working at it.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Tom. Great